The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Bob G. Antonio, and I am the Business Development Manager with Aseptico Incorporated, and we're very happy to have you joining us for the webinar today. Before I turn it over to Danny, I wanted to give you a couple of quick housekeeping items and also add some clarity on who I am and what I do. I mentioned that I'm the Business Development Manager with Aseptico, and my primary responsibility is to serve as Product Manager for the WAND all-injection anesthesia system. That product was developed and invented by a company called Milestone Scientific a little over a decade ago, and it's gone through some changes. It was originally launched as the Compuden, is now the WAND STA, and we at Aseptico took over as exclusive distributors back in November of 2012. In a few months, we are going to be the only company selling not only the drive units but also the hand pieces. So we're very excited about the product. It's going to be talked about a little bit by Danny today. And apart from that, that leads into the housekeeping items. The webinar today is going to be recorded and audio taped, and you'll all get a copy of that, so there's no need for you to take notes. Just sit back and follow along with the presentation. And during the presentation, you guys are all going to be muted. However, you can submit questions electronically, and we'll get back to you either at the end of the today's presentation. But for WAND-specific, for anesthesia-specific questions, I will be following up with each of you individually. So go ahead and type in your questions to the online here, and we will get them and sort them out at the end of the presentation. But let me introduce Danny for you. Danny Bobrow is an MBA and president of AIM Dental Marketing, and he's also the executive director of the Climb for a Cause and Smile Tree Foundations. Mr. Bobrow lectures nationwide, and he's been published in dozens of profession-related publications. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in economics from the University of Illinois and MBAs in finance and marketing from the University of Chicago and KUL Belgium, respectively. Danny is the author of The State of the Art in Dentistry Marketing, Strategies, Tips, and Secrets. And he's the author of The Art of First Impressions. He's also a certified mediator and arbitrator, charter member of the Speaking and Consulting Network, and founding executive committee member of the American Academy for Oral Systemic Health. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Danny.
Thanks a lot, Bob. I appreciate that kind introduction. And I want to acknowledge you, Chris, and my other friends at Aseptico, not only for offering a service and a product that really, without, I think, putting too fine a point on it, promises to broaden the appeal and accessibility of dentistry to the public, which, as we know, is a very important thing to do because such a large percentage of the population does not see a dentist because of fear. But I also want to acknowledge you for your generous support of our foundation. Aseptico has now, for 2 years, been a staunch supporter and participant in Climb for a Cause. Chris Berry joins us, and we always have a lot of fun, and we make a difference. So I appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
And what we want to talk about today is the all-important skill and art of connecting with prospective patients. That's because you can have the best offering in the world, and if you or your team are not adept at connecting with people who don't yet know you, like you, or trust you, it's really like you don't get a chance to ever run the race. You don't really get out of the starting blocks, and that's why this is so important. And what we're going to cover today are the foundational pillars, if you will, of building a house or a structure that enables you to consistently and deftly connect with these telephone callers. And the first thing we're going to talk about and share is setting the stage for success. And we will get into what that means. It has a technical and an interpersonal component for sure. We'll then sort of parse out what comprises effective communication, and that's important to understand why sometimes it's a bit of a challenge connecting with people on the telephone, and has to do very much with the visual gap, which is the next item we'll discuss. We'll then talk about some distinctions that are important to understand and then choose to avoid, like the self-fulfilling prophecy trap. And we will share the distinction between negatively and positively charged words and phrases and why they're so important to building this structure on a sound foundation of emotional connection. And speaking of emotional connection, we will talk about the key components, which are really establishing rapport, conveying empathy, and exuding enthusiasm as early and often in the call as possible, as well as the art and science of questioning and listening, which really have all to do with gaining control of the call and guiding the caller to a decision which is really ultimately in their best interest. So all these taken together lead to what we like to call agreement. Now, some assumptions that I make, which I think I make safely, because most people who choose this profession are doing so because they care. But the assumptions are that you, if you're a practice owner, and your team are enthusiastic about basically mastering this art because of all the power and potential it offers you to be more successful and to have a less stress experience during your workday. And I further assume that you care deeply about delivering the very best for your patients in your community, and that anybody who is in danger of answering the telephone is really excited about being there and sharing what it is that your practice has to offer in terms of helping people live happier and healthy lives, because that's what it's about. And these are some specific reasons why exceptional telephone skills are so important and valuable for your practice. And I like to use the analogy of the first date. And when we're on our first date, if we want to have a second date, we're on our best behavior. We want to impress. And that's why we talk about the art of first impressions. This telephone call really is your first date with the patient. And it will set the tone for the relationship going forward. And it's therefore a wonderful opportunity to set mutual expectations and set a tone of professionalism and mutual respect. And as I said, when you master this skill, it actually reduces confusion and stress because you're prepared and excited. Imagine if you were asked to perform a dental hygiene procedure and you were either fresh out of school or maybe hadn't even completed school. There's a lack of training and experience and confidence, and that's not as much fun as knowing your stuff. And we're talking about nothing less here than knowing your stuff when the phone rings. And this really is very much about branding. Branding is basically delivering on promises and, with hope, exceeding promises that are made. And if someone is responding to some sort of a solicitation or was referred by a fellow patient, they have certain expectations about what they want from a dental practice. And here's your opportunity right out of the gate to exceed their expectations. And for all these reasons, it is, in fact, your best marketing tool. Sometimes people make the mistake of thinking that marketing ends when the connection is made with the prospective patient, and in fact, it's only beginning. And we will talk about marketing math a little bit, not a lot of math, so don't worry, hang in there, but we will really use it to underscore the value of being able to convert these calls into solid patient appointments. So let's talk about what we mean when we say setting the stage for success. And the first thing we like to ask is, what describes your practice environment? Now, environment is the physical characteristic of your practice. It's also the environment in your own mind. Is your office cluttered? Is your mind cluttered? Are you distracted? Do you feel unprepared? Do you feel that the practice environment is not conducive to having a comfortable and focused conversation with a prospective patient? If the answer is yes, then all the training in the world, while it will be helpful, you will be limited in terms of your ability to maximize your value. So that's why these go hand in hand, and why we will talk in some specific detail about how to create an environment in the office that is conducive to effectively connecting with callers. And along the lines of the internal environment, what's happening in your mind, these are some concerns that we have heard over. We've talked and coached thousands of practices since 1989. And so we've got a pretty good idea about the perspective of the dental team member. And I think that's obviously important, because if we don't have that perspective, then we really lack the credibility and the empathy, which we talk about. We don't practice what we preach, basically. So I do want to go through a few things that are often mentioned, and sometimes they're not mentioned. They're just believed by the team member, and these are some of them, and they're in no particular order. But I want to spend a little time on them. Many people are perfectionists, and I will raise my hand and plead guilty to that as well. I've learned fairly recently that although it's really touted as a virtue in our society, being a perfectionist is really not a virtue, because perfectionism leads to a number of unintended consequences, one of which is procrastination. When somebody feels that they have to know something perfectly before they will attempt to do it, like adopt a new telephone call handling protocol, they're unlikely to ever want to start or be able to start. They're basically suffering from paralysis by analysis. The other kind of interesting fact is that until you actually dive in and begin to practice something, you never really can perfect it, because you're not getting the data, the feedback that you need to know whether something you're doing works or doesn't work. And so we like to practice the 80-20 rule, a variation of it, which is if you're 80% confident, you should dive in. And then you'll get the next 80% within a reasonable period of time, and you'll never be perfect. You'll never be perfect anyway, so don't even worry about it. People also express the concern that this is not their personality. And I actually have a couple of viewpoints on this. And number one, when you go to a restaurant and you are given excellent service by a server, you don't really necessarily know what kind of day they're having. It's not really so much a comment on their personality as their personal state of mind. We're professionals, and we have to leave our personal baggage at the door, and I think you all know that. In terms of personality, when one becomes confident and is really deftly able to practice the distinctions that we share in the art of first impressions, it's then that your true personality has an opportunity to shine through. In other words, because you know what your goal is and you know where you're headed, you can then allow your true personality to shine through, and that is actually not just okay, it's essential, because people don't want to talk to an automaton or someone that they view as just going through some rote procedure. And it's just like the dentist, when they're practicing, they're having a conversation frequently, and that's important because that sets the patients at ease. And it's very much the same thing here. If the dentist was just out of dental school and was having to think consciously about every move that he or she is making, it's pretty tough to have your personality shine through. And in terms of whether you were hired to do this or not, the fact is we live in a dynamic world, and really any practice that is willing to invest in your coaching to master this art, I would actually look at as a positive thing, because they're actually offering to add to your skill set, and they're providing you with the tools so that you can become even more indispensable to the practice. We get a lot of pushback on reading off scripts. I suspect one reason is we know we all have experienced somebody reading off a script to us. And it's a negative experience, and it's usually the negative that we remember. But we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Being too busy is a commonly stated concern. And the only way I respond to that is that when the phone stops ringing, don't worry, you won't be busy for long. And in other words, there needs to be a rearrangement of priorities when that phone rings, because that really is your paycheck calling. When the phone stops ringing, the practice is in trouble. And lest you think this is not necessary, I hope everything I've shared already shows you that, in fact, acquiring these skills is very necessary. Some people think they're very good at it now already. And that reminds me of the phrase, which is, you may have heard, is that people know what they don't know, and they also don't know what they don't know. And this could be an example of not knowing what you don't know. And so all I would ask is that you be open to hearing what we have to share today, and see if you don't agree that there are some ways that perhaps you could do a better job of connecting with callers. It's tough to measure, and we'll talk about that later too, because you may have gotten off the phone with someone, and we'll talk about this in the context of the self-fulfilling prophecy, that they didn't come in, and you may console yourself in saying, well, they weren't a fit for our practice anyway. Well, maybe, maybe not, but the foregone production, the production you never experienced because that patient didn't come into the office, is something that you can't measure, but is nonetheless quite real. And we'll also talk about this sometimes held view that people that are responding to an external stimulus like a direct mail piece are somehow low quality, and we will demonstrate how that has never been demonstrated to be the case. And we know that patients, once they meet you, love you. This is a frustration that sometimes we hear from dental team members. And the fact is that they've already met you. They've just met you on the phone. And so we want to show you how to make them love you over the phone, so they can't wait to meet you in person. Now, in terms of this concern about reading off a script, I already gave you an example, cited one example of scripts that we've heard is a bad telemarketer that reads and doesn't listen and just is obviously just dialing for dollars. And that's what gives scripts a bad name. But I would ask you to consider some of these that you might remember, depending on how old you are. This is sometimes an age test, because these are quotes from some of the movies that have really become a part of our collective culture. Wizard of Oz, On the Waterfront. I think that's Magnum Force. Go ahead, make my day. I actually don't remember. It's a Dirty Harry movie, but it wasn't the first one. Gone with the Wind, and I think Sunset Boulevard. All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up. These, if you recognize them, are actually very memorable, and they give us warm feelings, and they really remind us of what a great performance we received. Well, remember, these are all lines off a script. And the reality is that the reason we remember them so fondly is that the actor got what they call in the acting profession, they got off book. That means that they internalized these lines to the point where they didn't have to think about what they were saying, and then they allowed their personality to come through. With actors, it's actually their persona, because we don't even know what their true personality is necessarily. The more versatile actors will prove that to you, that they're all over the map. You know, they can be animated characters, and they can be heavies, and they can be comedic characters. And so it's easier for us, because we don't want you to assume a persona. We want your true personality to come through. Now, having said all that, if you don't like the term script, it might be a negatively charged word for you. If it is, think about checklist or even map. And frankly, I think they're more appropriate, because we don't want you rotely reciting a script word for word. We want you to realize that there are certain key points that you want to do, like establish rapport, convey empathy, exude enthusiasm, get the caller's name, use the caller's name, and connect with them. And exactly how you do that is not my concern. You may do that by sharing the fact that you have children on the same Little League team. That's great. That's what we want to hear. Now, setting the stage, as I mentioned earlier, does also depend upon the physical environment and your equipment. And we're going to talk a little bit about telephone systems, cordless headsets, what people hear when they're placed, when they call you after hours, and what people hear when they're placed on hold at your office. And the key is that we want all these systems working in concert, which means you, every member of the team, needs to know, what do people hear when they call you after hours? That's important because they might make reference to it. And specifically, we want to offer convenience to callers. We don't always know when they're going to call, so one way to offer them convenience, and this is just a tidbit that I throw in here because I think it's important, is your outgoing message should reference your website if it's able to accept appointment requests. And just about every website today at least has a Contact Us form. So this shows some convenience, and it also invites them to learn more about you. Many of the people calling your office have already been to your website, by the way. That's where more and more people are going to find and evaluate a practice before they ever even call you. And likewise, if you have an on-hold message, and I hope you do, what does it say? Because what if somebody says, yeah, that's really interesting. Tell me about your implant-supported dentures. Or I didn't know that you were supporting the local JCs. My husband's a part of that group. And if you say, what? I don't know what you're talking about. That's obviously a missed opportunity to connect with the caller. Likewise, know what's on your website because people will reference it. I'm on a cordless headset right now. I have not used a handset since 1989, literally. They were not cordless back then. But cordless headsets are nothing less than freedom. Now, I don't know because we're not interacting right now, but I've heard things everywhere from we tried cordless headsets and we don't like them because they mess up our hair, they give us ear infections, they don't work. Change is uncomfortable, but I can tell you that the technology of today's cordless headset is so wonderful that if you're accustomed to using a handset, then there's a little bit of an adjustment. Sometimes it's a mental adjustment, and sometimes you simply need to call tech support and put yourself on your cordless headset, and they will walk you through how to optimize the sound quality. I strongly recommend this because it untethers you from the front desk. Remember we talked about whether your environment was serene or chaotic. If it's Grand Central Station at the front desk and you're trying to connect with a first-time telephone caller or a prospective patient, that is a challenge. And what we really want to do is get you in a position where you can go to a quiet area to give this caller your undivided attention. I recommend Mallory headsets. That's M-A-L-L-O-R-Y headsets.com. You can also go with hellodirect.com. They're very cost-effective. They're very durable, and they charge for at least 3 hours, and you can walk away like 300 feet from your desk. So no practice is too big to be served by cordless headsets. And your outgoing message, otherwise known as voicemail, unless you're using an answering machine or an answering service, which we'll talk about in a minute, is a very important connection. This is a first impression, and what I mean by first impressions don't always wait is that we cannot control when people are going to call our office. People will often call after hours because it's convenient for them, and that's why the outgoing message has got to be recorded and regularly monitored and taken very seriously, because a certain reasonable percentage of people their first contact with the office will be your outgoing message. So in general, during office hours, we don't want to hear it ring more than 4 times before answering. And 3 rings is even better. With most telephone systems, you should be able to change the settings so that when you're not in the office, the caller doesn't have to hear any rings. And that's really important because here's another convenience feature. People don't like to be kept waiting. People on cell phones could be driving through a bad cell, and you could lose the call. And it's also the case that people, as you know, sometimes they have to sort of muster some courage to pick up the phone and call a dental office in the first place. So all they need is an excuse to say, yeah, honey, I tried to call the dentist, but it just kept ringing and I just hung up. So let's make it really simple for them to connect with you. I'd also recommend you avoid reference to hours and anything else that might be fluff. I can only guess that the reason that people refer to their office hours is that the first answering machines or maybe the outgoing messages that we hear are retail establishments, which a dental office is. I mean, it's a local area business for sure, but it's important to know what a pizzeria's hours are or a dry cleaner's hours. But we are not really a walk-in business, are we? And therefore, I doubt, unless you're a rare exception where you have high walk-by traffic, or you're a Sears Dental Center, I suppose, it's very, very unlikely that anybody is going to walk into the office without first calling you. And in fact, giving the hours is one less reason for a person to leave a message, because they want to know what your hours are. They may want to know that when they're calling. So it also unnecessarily lengthens the time of the outgoing message, which is another inconvenience. And while we're on the subject, when repeat callers, current patients call you, it's very nice as a convenience to say, to bypass the remainder of this message, please press pound or 0. Make sure that your system accommodates it, because sometimes I will do that and I will press pound and then I'll hear, please enter your password. And then I have to hang up and call back and listen to the message all over again. So, in general, we like the outgoing message to not be longer than 45 seconds. 25 seconds is even better. And we have a lot of clients that are able to convey all the information they need, which is that basically, we're glad you called, we're sorry we're not available, we care about you. Please leave a confidential message of any length or visit our website. And that is it. And remember that you're actually communicating with people. The person who's doing the recording may not be talking to a person at that time, but obviously that recording is intended to be listened to by human beings. So be enthusiastic. Be excited. Select the person in your office who gives the best phone, so to speak, and let them have at it. Now, if you have an answering service, I strongly advise that you check it often. We have had very little success with consistent reliability of the quality of an answering service. They will often begin good, and I don't know if they reach their own level of incompetence by taking on more clients than they can handle, or what it is, but I just had another experience last week trying to make an appointment with an ophthalmologist that I was referred to. I said I was referred by a doctor, and they said, well, are you a patient? I said, well, I'm a prospective patient. Oh, well, you have to call back. We don't take messages. I said, well, I was referred by a doctor who's friends with the doctor. I'm sorry, you can't leave a message. I said, I'm a consultant who actually evaluates how telephone calls are being handled. And then she hung up on me. Now, that could be that she was exactly following the policy of the office, too. So whatever your protocol is, you want to evaluate that and make sure that it's open to prospective patients, because you don't know who's going to be calling you. And if you're accepting new patients, and most dental practices are, you certainly don't want that to be the protocol. Now, on-hold messages is what callers hear when you're placed on hold. And if I place you on hold, you hear this. That message runs for 4 minutes, and because I use a VoIP system, it always begins at the beginning, which I kind of like. But the reality is that every office will place callers on hold. Sometimes we'll talk to practices and say, we never place callers on hold. And frankly, if that's true, then you're probably overstaffed. So, but in any case, we will get into this and actually show you where we recommended under certain circumstances, namely a new patient caller, we recommend that you place them on hold, provided that you have a high-quality, regularly updated on-hold message that entertains and educates callers and is not overly commercial and obviously is not dead air. Tests have shown that when people are placed on hold and listen to dead air or an out-of-tune radio station or something else ridiculous like a competitor's commercial, that they are tapping their foot waiting. But when they hear an entertaining and informative on-hold message, it literally cuts the perceived time they're on hold in half. And that's great because it buys time for the team then to do what they need to do to return to the line and give this caller their undivided attention. And in terms of the proper implementation of an on-hold message solution, we do recommend that you update it frequently. And we do offer a service that does this. It's all online. Its quarterly updates are sent to you, and we've made it really very smooth and almost seamless, because otherwise practices don't have time to do it. And we want you to do it because this is another touch point that demonstrates that you're not only a professional that's committed to high-quality dental care, but that you're also a vibrant, involved, engaged member of your community. This gives you an opportunity to share what you're up to, what you're doing, and that you are people too. And I think that's a particularly valuable thing for a dental practice to remind people of, because as we all know, in general, people are a little bit trepidatious when it comes to visiting their dentist. So the more you can connect with people on an emotional level, the better. And again, we recommend that you call and check the system frequently to make sure that it's operating. Our systems are pretty much foolproof. We use a USB, so there's no moving parts, but switches can be turned, volume can be reduced, things happen. And if nothing else, it's good to remind yourself what it says, especially if you're updating it regularly. So again, if somebody asks about it, you can very seamlessly and deftly respond to that inquiry without thinking too much about it. And we've already talked about the virtues of it. It builds a professional image. And we will talk more about this, but it also is a tool to help prepare you to speak with the most important person in the world, which is your newest patient. This is what we call the TAFI intro. TAFI is short for the art of first impressions. And if you walk away today with nothing more than this, I believe that your time today will have been well invested. This is not just randomly put together verbiage. I will deconstruct it throughout the rest of this presentation so you can see why it is what it is, but I thought I would introduce it right now just to show you. So the first thing we do is we say thank you for calling. In our case, thank you for calling AIM Dental Marketing, where we take aim with your marketing. This is Danny. How may I help you? And in your case, you would say thanks for calling our practice name, where we, and I hope you have a tagline. A tagline is basically a distillation of your brand. It is a memorably simple statement about what makes you special and different. And I strongly advise practices to go through an exercise to establish a tagline with the input of the team. And another benefit of using it in your introduction is that it reminds the team who you are, what you do, for whom you do it, and why. And it reinforces in their mind why we're all here. Now, whatever the person says, they may say, I'm seeking a second opinion. I'd like to know if you're my insurance plan. I'd like to know how much a crown costs. I'd like to know the purpose of life or why the sky is blue. I really don't care the question. The answer really should be this, or a slight variation on this, which is, I can help you with that. My name is Danny. May I ask who I'm speaking with? And then the next question that you ask is, are you in any discomfort presently? And use their name, even if you pretty much know they're not in discomfort, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Who may we thank for referring you to us? And again, there's a reason we're suggesting that you include these in the introduction. And then here's the transition to help you buy time to get to a quiet area, to clear your mind, to reprioritize, because it's showtime with this prospective patient. And the verbiage is, would you mind if I place you on hold for just a moment so I can get to my desk or get to a quiet area and give you my undivided attention? People will never have a problem with that. And if you have a high-quality on-hold message system, you will have easily 60 seconds to do whatever you need to do to prepare to talk with this person and to give them your undivided attention. On the East Coast, it's called takeaway. I'm in the Midwest, it's called takeout. But this is a big takeaway, as I said. So if you get nothing else from today's presentation, I hope you will walk away and take away this. So let's talk about the components of effective communication. And there was a study done in UCLA by Albert Moravian, a professor, who was commissioned to evaluate what comprises effective communication, and as well as what the percentage contribution was each component to effective communication. And those elements are the verbal, the vocal, and the visual. And the verbal is the actual words used. And note, it accounts for a whopping 7%. So it's not so much the words we use, it's how we use the words, and it's our body language. It's the gestures of the face and hands. And you may realize already that when you're on the telephone, we really don't have this component. And that's why we talk about the need to minimize the visual gap, because when you're on the phone, callers can't see you. Actually, they can, because they have a mind's eye. But they develop that impression based on what they hear, which makes the use of the verbal and vocal components all the more vital. Let's talk about the self-fulfilling prophecy trap. This posits that when we label someone as undesirable, the quality of our communication changes, and unfortunately, it inevitably changes for the worse. Basically, we judge a book by its cover, and we write the book. And I've seen this time and again. This is very important when you're talking about prospective patients, because many of them, depending on what you're doing, more and more practices are engaging in external marketing, because then they have control over the growth rate of their practice. There's a certain assumption somehow that somebody who calls asking about a price or a second opinion is somehow of lower quality than your community in general, and that's just not true. The reality is that people are calling you because they're interested. If they weren't interested, they've got better things to do than call you, and how you respond to those inquiries makes all the difference. And that's why my friend Bill Rossi of Advanced Practice Management in Edina, Minnesota, writes this, that externally generated patients, they don't know or trust you. Doesn't mean they're not good patients. And the thing is, we tend to focus on the negative, the clinkers as he calls them. But, put yourself in their place. When you are calling for a service, especially one that you don't know much about, I bet the most likely question you're going to ask is, how much does it cost? And that means you're interested. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're interested in the lowest cost. What it really means is that you don't know what else to ask. If a dental patient were calling you and expressed what was truly on their mind, they would probably say something like, I've had negative experiences with dentists in the past, and what I'm really hoping is that you can demonstrate to me right now on the phone that you're caring, compassionate, and will deliver value when I see you, if I see you. That's really what they want to know. So don't be confused by the words they use. Here's a little test I like to do just to underscore the point. Let's imagine that there's two calls, that you have two phones, and they both ring at the same time. And on line one is Bill, and Bill is calling because his fiance has, quote, asked him to get his teeth done in time for their big day, so they are proud and have some nice pictures for their wedding album. On the other line is Agnes, and Agnes just received a direct mail piece offering a complimentary consultation and wants to know how much a crown costs. My question for you is, who would you rather talk to? Now, if you're like most people and you're honest, and I understand this, you'd probably rather talk to Bill. The reason is that Bill really doesn't require any selling. Bill has already been sold. He is, frankly, the result of your effective marketing, because his fiance is a happy patient of yours, and she's already established credibility. She's already created urgency. She's already directed him. Agnes is the same potential quality patient. She's just at a different stage in the relationship. Basically, by working with Agnes and getting excited about talking with her, you are creating future bills, if you will, because there's every reason to believe that at some point in the future, Agnes will be in the same position, a happy patient. It's just a matter of running the race at the caller's pace. So we want you to get excited about even more about the other one, because Bill, he's already If you want to use an agricultural analogy, he's ripe fruit or low-hanging fruit. He's ready for harvesting, and Agnes is a seed yet to be planted. So in terms of marketing math, we touched on it a little bit. It's just the reality that you can measure certain things. That's what you do know. And then there's things that you don't know. And in the case of this, one simple example is if the practice is investing $1,000 a month in marketing, X dollars, but just so we can do some math, let's say it's 1,000. And as a result of that marketing, they get the phone to ring 10 times. What you can measure is the cost per call, which is $1,000 investment divided by 10 calls is $100 per call. If you fail to connect with that patient and get them into the office, you could say, well, it cost me $100. However, that's just the tip of the iceberg. The average patient lifetime value, which was actually calculated by University of Minnesota, in conjunction with my friend Bill Rossi of Advanced Practice Management, and this was 12 years ago, came up with an average lifetime value, not production, but profit, of $4,800 per patient. I'm sure it's higher now. If your practice is above average, it's higher still. So the real cost is closer to $5,000 of not effectively connecting with the caller. That's something to really keep in mind, and that's why this is such a valuable skill right there. That explains it. Now, how do we actually connect with these callers? Well, one way is to make sure that the verbal component, even though it only comprises 7% of effective communication, remember, that's when you have the face-to-face offered too. So it at least doubles when you don't have the body language, the visual component. But negatively charged words can really affect people, and positively charged words can also affect people, but in a positive way. And by way of example, which seminar would you rather attend? Sexual harassment in the workplace and dealing with racism, or men and women as allies and friends and celebrating pluralism? Now, some of you may be ahead of me and already realize that they're the same lecture. We're basically talking about the same subject matter. However, the one on the bottom speaks in positive terms about how we can actually help address this problem or basically capitalize on an opportunity as opposed to dealing with a problem. And it's been proven. I'm a health coach, and we know that people that achieve and sustain weight loss do so because they did not approach it from a problem-solution standpoint, but from an opportunity standpoint. And it's all in the words that you use with other people and your self-talk, the words that you use with yourself. So use positive words, and here are some three really good ones to incorporate into your communication. They are proud, conservative, and concerned. And pride, self-evident, but it gives a sense that you really have an admiration and loyalty and appreciation for your doctor's care, skill, and judgment. It shows passion. And when we talk about enthusiasm, you'll see why that's so important. Passion is just another manifestation of enthusiasm. What I would ask you to do, because you've got to practice this to incorporate it. I mean, I'm sure people are nodding in agreement that this stuff is great and it makes sense. If you want to internalize it and make it your own, I encourage you to practice it with your team. So in this case, I would ask you to share specific reasons why you are proud to be a part of your practice. Now, with conservative, I don't really care what your political bent is. Nobody wants to go to a doctor who plays fast and loose with their health or takes unnecessary risks. And personally speaking, I would always want people to take the conservative approach. And I think you can weave the wand very well into this mindset also, because in every sense, it shows caring, but I think it's a conservative approach as well. And another question is, how would you demonstrate that in your treatment? Concern is a wonderful word to use because it means you care. And I'll jump ahead, but people really don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So this is a really good term. Show people that you're human beings, that you have compassion, and when you do that, people will connect with you, and If they were calling about insurance or a second opinion, all of a sudden that question is going to begin to diminish in importance because they've connected with you. Again, how do you show your concern for your patients specifically? It's all about the verbiage. And here's some more terms. You know, instead of appointment, say visit, softer. Instead of challenge or use challenge or opportunity instead of problem. Today's amount is certainly preferable to cost. And initial or monthly amount instead of down payment and monthly payment. And what I like, use remove or removal instead of extraction. Here's some more positive terms that you could use. Approve, approval, endorse, endorsement, authorization, okay, can I get your John Hancock instead of sign here. This is a really good one too. And also you don't need to use the verbiage that your callers are using. If somebody says, I'm looking for the cheapest dentist, say, wonderful. Value and economy are very important. We understand that. And that's why we offer, and then you give them the benefit. And a really good exercise is to heighten your awareness by listening to your friends and family and patients and coworkers and notice how their words make you feel. It's really interesting. If they say something, just monitor or gauge your own emotional reaction and then make a note of it. Say, well, that word is a word that made me feel good, or that word is a word that didn't make me feel so good, and it would have been, I would have preferred to have heard this word. And then you're sort of building a little vocabulary. More arrows in your communication quiver. So this is time to play Guess the Charge. And these are pretty simple now that you all have already mastered the distinction between negative and positive. So we have a thumbs down for the office can't see you until next Tuesday. I can help you with that. Thumbs up. You must submit your own insurance forms. We're delighted you've chosen to call us. Pretty straightforward, right? Just ask yourself how you feel. Which would you prefer, morning or afternoons for your next visit? We don't do it that way. That's exactly what the answering service said to me 2 weeks ago, by the way, when I said, well, I'd like to leave a message. He goes, well, we don't do it that way. And she hung up. We appreciate your considering us. So in other words, is your attitude one of my way or the highway? Or, yes, we can. And, of course, you know what we hope it is. So here are some of the emotional pillars that support a solid conversation based on emotional and connection. Empathy and rapport. And empathy is simply the capability, the capacity to understand another's feelings, to walk a mile in their moccasins. Rapport is a relation marked by harmony and conformity. And as I said, this is important because people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Another memorable phrase that I love by Maya Angelou is that people may not remember what you said, but they will always remember how you made them feel. Enthusiasm is key. Henry Ford said no one ever bought anything without an exchange of enthusiasm. We all know people like this, however, that they're at a 10, and we'd probably prefer them at more about a 7. However, I will share that on the phone it's usually the opposite. People need to up the volume, the intensity, the articulation just a little bit. I'm not really speaking in my normal voice right now. It's a little bit louder, it's a little bit clearer, it's a little bit more articulated. And that's because we're on the phone. And I would ask you to do the same. Exude that enthusiasm. Make it bigger than maybe you think it needs to be. People will appreciate it. They won't be scratching their head saying, what is this person doing? They will appreciate the enthusiasm. Excuse me. It's very important to get the name, the caller's name. Those of you who are too young to know about How to Win Friends and Influence People, was a book that was published in 1935 by Dale Carnegie. And one of the jewels, one of the gems in that book were that a person's name is the sweetest sound they will ever hear. And so people perk up when they hear their name. You don't want to overdo it, but again, most people aren't in danger of overdoing it. And that's why in the TAFI intro, you may recall, the first statement we make after our introduction, no matter what people ask us, why the sky is blue, can I get a second opinion, it's, I can help you with that. My name is Danny. May I ask with whom I'm speaking? And then get the name. And I want to take a moment here about name to talk a little bit more about this. If somebody calls for whom English is not their first language or has a speech impediment, take the time to get their name. Imagine you or them, and they're going through life where people who hear this hard to pronounce name will say, okay, thank you, dear, honey, or bud, or buddy, or pal, and they just gloss through it, and the person knows what they're doing. Imagine now that you take the time and say, I'm sorry, I didn't quite get your name, and I certainly want to make sure I can pronounce it correctly. It might be a bad connection. Would you mind spelling that for me? And let me try to pronounce it. You will have basically a friend for life, because this person, as I said, has gone through life where people haven't taken the time to know their name. It really works, and it's such a simple way to connect. So I strongly encourage you to do it. And now this gets into the more selling phase of the call. And I know that for some of you, selling is a negatively charged word itself. So if you prefer, there's a slide on this, but I'll just share it now. Selling for me is nothing more than giving people what they want. It's communication with a purpose. It's empowering people to make informed decisions. That is what selling is. We've been victims of bad sales, which is, again, just like a bad script, so we think that all sales is bad. But I have news for you folks. We are all in the sales business. The last time you convinced your spouse to go where you wanted to go for dinner, you made a sale. And the key to selling is understanding what's important to the people, to your prospective patient in this case. And one very important distinction along the way is understanding the difference between an attribute and a benefit. An attribute is just a physical characteristic. We're in a 3-story house. We have an elevator. We have a parking lot. Those are, we offer CEREC. We offer the wand. Those are all attributes. The benefit is a translation of that attribute into something that is important and valued by the person with whom you're communicating. Try to remember it in terms of A to B. You got to get from A to B, attributes to benefits. And here's some examples. We offer a complimentary smile analysis. A wonderful way to translate attributes to benefits is to simply use a word bridge, which is often that means. That means you can visit our office without cost or obligation to choose for yourself how we can help you receive the care you want and deserve. Here's another one. We offer oral DNA salivary testing. That means that simply by testing your saliva, we can identify bacteria that could be responsible for your oral health and prescribe treatment to help with your overall health, which sort of leads into the oral systemic care, which I'm very passionate about and want to help practices lead into this third era of care where they're helping their patients improve patient outcomes through collaboration and providing some really high-level diagnostics and treatment protocols that can really save a person's life, which is why you might want to say we're committed to oral systemic health in our office. And that's because not only does that enable us to help you save money, but by focusing on prevention and home care, we might even save your life. And then, of course, when it comes to the wand, there are almost limitless benefit statements you can offer. I mean, it's going to make the difference between people coming into an office and not. Think about what a great way to connect with a caller by saying we offer the wand, which means that we can administer anesthesia in a pain-free manner. So you know your dental experience will be pleasant and hassle-free. And for those of you who haven't seen it, that's the unit.
Hey, Danny, can I add something to that?
Please.
Yeah, this is Bob G. Antonio. You mentioned early in the presentation about the importance of the call and how it's the first date with the patient. And we like to think of the wand and how we market the wand is that really where rubber meets the road, anesthesia is the first date with the patient. There's a lot of dentists that can provide quality prophies. It's really that date with the syringe that will determine how satisfied and whether that, especially a new patient, whether they're going to come back to you or not. And the wand, I mean, it's an unmatched standard of care difference maker. It takes the guesswork out of syringe injections, and it really will make the difference with patients going to their websites, posting on their social media. I can't believe Dr. Bobrow, for example, Bobrow, for example, uses this technology. I didn't even feel the injection versus, oh my gosh, I just went to the dentist and it hurt like heck. Glad it's over.
No, that's absolutely true. There are a number of milestones in a relationship, and I think this is one where the relationship is either taken to the next level or it isn't. So, and I also am glad you mentioned, and I think you and I had talked about perhaps doing a subsequent webinar on social media, because we're very passionate about that too. But we agreed that setting up the social media sites so that they're optimized and that they connect and that you're getting them visited and connected and friended and liked and all that is vital. But ultimately, where that rubber hits the road is with the content that you share. And to truly go viral, it's important, not just helpful, but vital, that there be something that the typical patient really can embrace and get excited about and share. And I agree with you. I can't think of one experience that better qualifies for that than an experience with the wand, especially when people have, experienced in the past such an unpleasant experience with anesthesia. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
And with this, Danny, one last thing. I mean, with social media, this is an opportunity. And to what you said, you want to piggyback on your patients' social media forums. Obviously you're going to want to set up as a dental clinic your own social media blasts and things like that. But in this particular case, you're letting the patients do the marketing for you. You're letting them go back and encouraging them to post on their network, because this is, I mean, dental marketing is generally a local game. So what better way than to have your patients posting on their social media network how great their experience was at the clinic, particularly when it relates to the #1 cause of fear and anxiety in dental, which is syringe injection. So I agree with you. I think a presentation on social media could be a completely different animal and be very well received. But that's all I have for now.
You're kind of stealing my thunder here. You're already anticipating some of my benefits, but I will say that I can't think of a better example of third-party endorsement. You are spot on. Let's show some more examples of attributes and benefits when you do own and use the wand. There's what dentists call collateral numbness. This thing is just more precise. And but you could say that to somebody, but you've got to translate it so they can see, oh, this is why it's going to make it better for me, because you can leave your appointment smiling and speaking normally. You're not going to be, you're not going to have a speech impediment or burn yourself drinking a hot liquid and having it drip down your chin after your procedure.
Well, and a couple of other things, for the working folk like myself, you don't have to take a half day of personal time off to go to the dentist. I can go in for a lunch appointment or maybe an hour and a half appointment and go back to work. And certainly if you're seeing children, you're not running the risk of children or special needs patients chomping down on the sides of their mouth or their tongue. Another big advantage of not having collateral numbness with relatively routine procedures.
Yeah, it's just one benefit and example of how you care for your patients and about your patients after another. So I agree. Here's another attempt of ours, no syringe injection, which is the #1 reason people don't go to the dentist. And again, people are calling. They haven't made a decision. They're gathering info, and what a great way to connect with them and allay the fear that they're likely to have, statistically speaking. So we have yet another one. Yeah, bilateral dentistry. You can take care of more in fewer visits, which is, again, another convenience. As Bob mentions, they take less time away from work or from work, whatever else they'd prefer to do, which is probably most things. Most people would rather be someplace else. So what a great way to give it to them. And in general, we're just, this whole presentation is about giving you a plan so that you can deal with predictable scenarios, which if you think about it is probably 95 to 98% of the calls you're going to get, because people aren't calling you to find out if you can flat top their driveway, or if you sell snow tires, and they're calling about things that you can pretty well predict. And so let's take the time to go through these scenarios that are predictable, which is almost all of them, and master the verbiage so you can just get excited about that phone when it rings and know that by being able to deftly connect with these callers, you're growing the practice. And I presume that the case is that when your practice grows, everybody wins. There's more money for bonuses and raises and time off and hiring more people so you can take time off. It's, you know, it's the old rising tide raises all boats. Oh yeah, and here's where we share the definitions if for you selling is a negatively charged word, which I hope by the end of today's presentation, if it was, it no longer is. And again, this is where we talk about really the script is sort of the checklist or the roadmap. Once you know where you're headed and the key points that you need to accomplish in the call, we want you to sort of seemingly lose control, but you never really lose control. But what I mean by that is you want to connect with the caller by finding out what you have in common. You could share your commitment to philanthropy or connection to the community or your commitment to oral systemic health. And these are, as I'd mentioned earlier, introduced a little prematurely, these are arrows in your marketing quiver or in your communications quiver. Don't wing it. You can learn on every call, and you will, but it'd be great to already know, how do you answer a question when someone says, I had a bad experience with a dentist, or you're so far away from me, or I'm having trouble finding you, or are you in my plan, and any one of a number of questions. You just be prepared for them. And the enthusiasm part is not only are you prepared to share things, but you're going to be excited about sharing them. And here's a list. Another exercise I would ask you to consider taking the time, dental team as well as practice owner. Add this to your regular team meetings. What is it that you get to share with the caller? What's great about the doctor, the facilities, the amenity, our commitment to giving back? Whatever it is. These are great because this is the attribute, we're excited about it, and here's why you should care. This is what's in it for you. Well, this is sort of where the rubber meets the road in terms of connecting with callers. It's the art and science of questioning and listening. You know, a lot of people think the best salespeople are good talkers. I really couldn't disagree more. The best salespeople are good listeners. And the way they listen is by asking questions, by knowing when to ask the right question in the right way, well, and at the right time, which is what I meant by when. And this is how you connect with callers. You have to ask questions because whoever is asking the questions controls the call. And I know we all like to be in control of the clicker. And one of the keys to the art and science of questioning is understanding the distinction between open and closed probes, or open-ended and closed-ended questions. An open-ended question is one that invites the person with whom you're speaking to elaborate. A closed-ended question is a question that can be answered with one or very few words, such as yes, no, up, down, I will, I won't. Open-ended questions invite people to elaborate. And the order that we recommend that you follow in a call with a first-time telephone caller is close, open, close. The oil can is just to illustrate and underscore the fact that questions are the lubricant behind effective communication that really make the machinery of communication run. So it's key that you get comfortable with them. So let's revisit our TAFI intro, and now you'll understand better why it is structured the way it is. Thank you for calling our practice where your tagline, this is your name, how may I help you? I can help you with that, my name is. Note the next item. This is a closed probe. With whom am I speaking? And what it does in a very subtle way is not only are you getting the person's name so that you can use the name, and we've already discussed why that's so important, but it's also placing you very subtly but very firmly in control of the call. The next question is, are you in any discomfort presently? Now, that is another closed probe. And note that we use the caller's name. But the other very important distinction that I'm going to share here is that you know that when we ask questions, it is an opportunity not only to gather information, it's also an opportunity to impart information. When we ask if somebody is in discomfort, and I ask people why we're asking that, the ones who don't yet know what they don't know, they say, well, that's because we want to know if it's an emergency and when we need to get them into the office. And I say, that's absolutely right. And then I ask, what information are we imparting by asking this question? And the answer is, and I'm sure many of you already realize it, is that we care enough to ask. We care about you. So within 15 seconds of a caller, you're already establishing rapport and conveying empathy that early. And I said earlier that you can't do it too early. The next question that we ask is, who may we thank for referring you to us? And people say, well, you're doing that because you want to see how good your marketing is, what's working, and you want to actually know who you can thank so you can send them a gift. And that's true. And then I ask, what information are we imparting? And this one's a little more subtle. But what we're imparting here, friends, is that we're confident that you must have been referred to us by one of our many happy patients. And again, this is a very subtle way to exude this professionalism, this caring, and this confidence, because people like to work with people who are confident and professional. And then the last question in our TAFI intro is, would you mind if I place you on hold for just a moment so I can get to my desk and give you my undivided attention? Another closed probe. You are now asking the questions. And again, this key bridge here is what buys you time to reprioritize and give this caller your undivided attention, provided you have a cordless headset and an on-hold message that is professionally produced and regularly maintained. So those are the closed probes. So we just completed basically the closed cycle, so to speak. Now, you really don't move to asking open-ended questions until you've been either given explicitly or implicitly permission by the caller. And you will know with practice when the caller is comfortable opening up to you. I actually met with a client yesterday about a health coaching opportunity, and I could tell he wasn't really ready to open up to me yet because we kept talking about, he was on one side of his brain talking about the logic behind the program and how he wants to do this to help his patients get healthy. And I was trying to get him to see that he needs to lead by example, which means, you know, what about you? Why are you going to do it? And I realized that I was asking that question a little bit too early. He wasn't sufficiently comfortable to open up to me. Eventually he did. But so that's really important to understand. And that's where the art comes in. I'm sort of sharing the science, but it's the art is actually responding to the feedback that you're receiving from your prospective patient. But once you do have permission, these are some good open-ended questions. And actually, this one isn't a question, it's a statement, but it does open them up. Please tell me what it is about your smile you'd like to improve. Or can you share what's kept you from addressing this until now? Or why do you feel now is the time to get this taken care of? And here's a response to somebody who maybe was told by somebody else or for some reason believes they need a crown. And you obviously address it, and you show that you've heard them and say, a crown is certainly one way to achieve great cosmetic results. Would you mind if I asked you a few questions to help be sure that we're giving you the information you need to make the right choice? And they say, sure. Now, that's permission for you to ask questions. And when you get it, now you are gathering information, and then you're listening. And as I said, that's where the sale comes in, because effective selling is having your radar out and listening closely and carefully to find out what's important to the caller, and then matching those needs with your ability to fill those needs. And if you don't have the ability to fill those needs, then you honestly share that information, and they've made the right choice, which is that maybe you're not a fit for them. And that's okay. We're not asking or suggesting that you should be right for everybody. And then once you've identified the wants, or buying signals as we call them, then you move to the close of the procedure. And again, these are the closed probes. Will mornings or evenings be better for your first visit? What form of payment will you be using today? Can we help you process your benefits paperwork? So remember, close, open, close. And that takes us to the final component of the art of first impressions, which is effective listening technique. When you listen, listen fully and completely. Really try not to be distracted. And again, that has to do with the environment in the office, which is why we recommend the on-hold message and the cordless headset in the quiet area. Concentrate on what they're saying. Sometimes people think that listening is just patiently waiting for your next opportunity to say what you want to say. That's not listening. Okay? And also, don't assume that you know what the patient is saying or thinking, or invalidate them by finishing their sentences for them. You will have heard many things over and over again. You'll probably be right that you know what they're going to say. But it's really important that they say it. It shows respect and understanding. And I know you all know this. Feel free to explore with them. You know, why are they here? And then let them talk. And these are just some verbiage cues that you can use as far as how to address concerns about fees and reimbursement, and turning everything into a positive. If somebody wants to know about it, you let them know that you care. I mean, there's some coaching services that will try to sidestep the question if someone says, are you in my insurance plan? And you say, well, you know, we can talk about that in a minute. You know that most insurance doesn't really cover most dental procedures. Would you mind if I tell you what our practice is about? Because it's really great. And people might say yes, but that's almost like saying, you know, while I'm telling you this, would you mind not thinking about a pink elephant? They really can't think about anything else. And, you know, our approach is to address the concern and say, yeah, that's a really good question. Obviously, affordability and being able to maximize all the benefits that you're entitled to are very important. And that's why we have a treatment coordinator or a benefits coordinator on staff to help with us. Do you have your insurance card with you? If you do, let me jot down some information, and I'll share that with Peggy, and then we'll get back to you on that. Now, let me know why you're calling, or would you mind telling me why you're calling? You see, they're not really calling to see if you're on their plan. That's, again, that's a little hook that they hang their hat on. That's a question that they know to ask. But why would they all of a sudden have a burning interest and need to know if your dental practice participates in their plan? They must have a dental need, right? So what you want to do is address that first question so they know that they're going to be dealt with, that's going to be addressed, and then that frees them up to share why they're really calling. And these are some good verbiage to use, that all financial considerations are shared in advance of any treatment, so rest assured, we're going to make sure that you're making an informed decision, and you let us know how and whether you want to proceed. Because we never let affordability get between you and the care you want and deserve. I already talked about good old Peggy. Now, if people press you for pricing, offer them a range. Even better, and this is a little advanced, we offer something called the triad close, which is to dazzle them with data. Somebody says, I really want to know about what a crown costs. I say, well, crowns are practically all we do. We love it. And if you'd mind, would you mind if I just asked you a few questions and told you a little bit about our procedures? And then proceed to tell them all you want about crowns and let them know always three options: low cost, high cost, and why one's low cost and why one's a high cost. It's convenience or durability or quality or aesthetics or whatever. And then say, but you know, I'm not the dentist, and even if I were, it would be tough for me to diagnose you over the phone. And that's why we offer a complimentary meet and greet so that you can meet with the professional and he or she can do an examination and let you know what we think your options are, and then it's up to you to decide how and whether to proceed. So you've given them the information, and at some point they're like, I'm sorry I asked. You know, this person is talking my ear off. I just going to get off the phone. I'm going to make an appointment to come in. So that's the approach. Again, enthusiasm, positivity, if such a word exists. Another issue is directions. I spoke to somebody just yesterday. It wasn't a dental office. Oh, it was the library, because I've moved to this area. I was looking for the Wakanda Library. I said, well, are you east of Route 12? I have no idea, sir. Okay, well, so they've lived there for 25 years, and that's fine. They don't need to know whether they're east of Route 12, but other people do. So I would encourage you, if there's frequently used public transportation in your area, or, some people deal with east and west, some people need landmarks. Take the time to know where you are and how to communicate that to people. They will appreciate it. So essentially, by way of wrap-up, if you want to connect with the callers, you have to first sell by having the yes we can attitude, establishing rapport, conveying empathy, exuding enthusiasm, avoiding those self-fulfilling prophecies, using positive words, using effective questioning technique, the close, open, closed protocol, if you will. Translate those attributes into benefits, listen for the want, that is the buying signals, and only then qualify. Because a wise man once said, if we're going to do business, we can discuss details later. If we're not going to do business, the details don't matter. So these are the keys. Master the TAFI intro, establish rapport, convey empathy, exude enthusiasm, employ effective questioning and listening technique, and remember the TAFI intro one last time. Thank you for calling ADM, where we take aim with your marketing. This is Danny. How may I help you? I can help you with that. My name is Danny. With whom am I speaking? Now, we're not a dental office, so we don't usually ask people if they're in any discomfort, but often they do experience some practice pain points, which we can address. And then I ask, who may we thank you for referring to us? And would you mind if I place you on hold for just a moment so I can get to my desk and give you my undivided attention? And there you have it. And I want to thank everyone for attending. We seem to have lost our host, Bob. I do have on the screen the offer that we want to make to all attendees. Feel free to learn more about our Art of First Impressions CDs and coaching service, as well as our on-hold message service at your convenience. Thank you very much for your time. And
I'm sorry, Danny. I just got back on it. You're right. I did have a technical problem, but I also want to thank everybody for attending. And, yeah, certainly contact Aseptico for the special offer if you have questions on the wand. And, you can type in any questions that you have here now, and we will get back to you within the next 24 hours. Sorry again for that little pause there.
That's quite all right. Do we have time for some questions?
I certainly have the time if there are questions.
Are there?
Let's see. Danny, I'll just ask some quick questions to you here. How often do you recommend revisiting telephone coaching skills with the team?
Well, I'm glad that you're asking that. I think I'd mentioned earlier that the key to anything, as you know, is repetition, to mastering a skill. And so this has really got to be internalized, and that's why I'm glad that we're offering this as a recording and people can review it. I like to see it as part of every team meeting. I like to see, if you do a weekly meeting, that you have a stories from the front desk, sort of dispatches from the front, if you will, where team members have an opportunity to share and sort of cross-pollinate their experiences. And that's a wonderful learning tool. The other wonderful learning tool is to record conversations. And when you do that, you have, as I mentioned, a tremendous tool, because there's really nothing better than hearing yourself. Well, better in terms of learning. It's a little uncomfortable sometimes, and certainly at first. But people get over that quickly. I think repetition is key, especially if you're learning a new skill. So, more frequently at the beginning, I would say weekly at least. And then you can, you can dial it down as people are demonstrating their skill. But I think frequency is very important.
And for specific patient calls, patient-related calls, how do you recommend responding to patients who are uncomfortable with having their calls recorded?
Oh, that's a good question. I would just tell them why you're recording them. I would say the reason here's the two ways. The reason we're recording calls is because we're committed to ensuring that our communications are as effective as possible. It's a learning process. People call us with questions sometimes that we want to be sure that we address to their satisfaction. And you should also know, caller, that your calls are only recorded because you are calling in on a new patient line. Once you become our patient, we invite you to use our direct connect telephone number, which is not recorded.
Okay. On the note of new patients, staying on the subject of new patients, how long should offices be on the phone with a new patient?
As long as necessary. And this goes in the face of some other coaching you may have heard or some other philosophies. For me, trying to get off the phone quickly with a new patient is a matter of being minute-wise and dollar-foolish, to mix my metaphors. And that's because I just listened to a beautiful call that went for 15 minutes last week. This caller was concerned, and this caller had really done his research, and he wanted answers. And I thought that Lori, the caller, did an excellent job of hanging with that patient, and she got the appointment. Now, having said that, as you become more adept at this, the amount of time that you need to spend with a caller will reduce, because you will effectively and quickly establish rapport, convey empathy, and exude enthusiasm, and get to the point and control the call. Because if you don't, one reason that calls go on indefinitely is because the call handler doesn't take control of the call. When you're in control, you can much more easily and respectfully say, instead of saying, I haven't got any more time to talk to you, you could say, I really enjoyed speaking with you. I feel like I've known you for quite some time, and I can't wait to meet you. And I just want to confirm that we are on then for Tuesday at 3 p.m., and I'll look forward to meeting you then. Is there anything else I can answer for you right now? Which is basically a nice way of saying I'm out of time. I have to go.
Danny, for situations when the office is not busy, the phones are not, they're wide open, do you still recommend or advocate placing callers on hold?
No, not necessarily. But sometimes, even if you're not busy, it depends on the caller. If you get the sense that the caller might benefit from hearing the message, that it might calm them down, or it might impart some information. Obviously, if they're in a hurry, you don't want to do that. But what you can sometimes do, and by the way, what I really do want to add is that if you're going to place somebody on hold, if you have the time, you should say, in case we're disconnected, would you mind if I just jot down your contact information? Because not all calls are being recorded. If they're a client of ours and it's a prospective patient call, then we are recording it most likely. But it's a good practice to get the contact information and then just say, would you mind if I just place you on hold for a moment so I can get to a quiet area and give you my undivided attention? And if they say, well, I really haven't got time for that, say, well, okay, I'm sorry. But I've got your information. Why don't I call you back when it's a little bit more convenient? It's
I certainly recommend it. I certainly recommend and endorse taking down patient names or anybody's name who calls in. I think that's just a great service. For one, you're showing them that you care, and secondly, you're not relying on technology to either record the call or for caller ID to log who it is. With the number of calls that are coming in on cell phone, I know we here in the sales and marketing department at Aseptico, we strongly advocate that every single call come in that you write down the name of the caller, the number of the caller, just in case something happens. There's no better form of service in getting back to somebody when they're disconnected, particularly if they have been on hold for a while.
I agree. And that was a long answer to a short question. The real short answer is it depends. Well, no, and the question was, should they be placed on hold even if the office is not busy? And the answer is no, not necessarily.
Right. And you know, my last question is for people that do purchase the special offer, the Art of First Impressions. How long does it generally take for practices, for the individuals to become comfortable with the Art of First Impressions, or the TAFI introduction?
That is well, the introduction, it's a great question regardless, because it really does depend. And I will tell you this, and it's like, I don't know how many in attendance are golfers, but if you've been a golfer and you've wanted to improve your game, you go to a golf coach, and he tells you you're doing your swing all wrong, and he gives you a new swing. So let's say you were golfing in the 80s, and then he gives you your brand new swing, and you go out and you try it. Chances are you're going to be golfing in the 90s or hundreds. And for those of you who don't know, the more strokes in golf, the worse. In other words, you're going to get worse at first when you try something new. And we really work with our team, our coaching subjects, to let them know that that's going to happen. Because otherwise they can get frustrated and disillusioned, then you go back to the old way of doing things, which is more comfortable, but not as successful. And so the TAFI intro itself, I have some people that picked it up immediately. And I think often the people who don't pick it up are the ones who didn't really understand why. And I understand that. I mean, I don't learn by rote. If I don't understand the logic behind something, it really doesn't stick. And I question why I'm doing it. So people who go through this and really understand why we've created the TAFI intro and structured it as we have are much more likely to embrace it and duplicate it that much more quickly.
So, you know, I don't want to speak for you, but it sounds like, you know, one of the things we deal with when we're integrating the wand anesthesia system into a couple of practices. Number one, you've got an existing practice with maybe a more seasoned doctor that's been giving syringe injections all of their lives, and they're accustomed to that paradigm. We generally encourage them to stick with it for a couple of weeks, really focus on training and making the paradigm shift. And it does take a little bit longer for the office dynamic to change versus a new, younger, right out of maybe a recently graduated resident right out of dental school comes in, adopts the technology, and jumps on board. I would imagine it's the same along the lines with the TAFI presentation. If the office has been doing it a certain way for a long period of time, it's going to be something that they need to stick with and maybe work a little harder than if it's a new practice just getting up and running and they adopt these principles right off the bat. They'll probably come up to speed a little bit quicker.
That's right. And although I promised myself I would try to get through this presentation without one pun, in the case of the wand, you would not stick with it, right?
Yeah. Exactly, or not as often anyway, right? Very nice. Those are all the questions I have. It was a great presentation. Thank you.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you, and I appreciate everybody's time and effort, and I hope they found it worthwhile.
Okay. Well, that's a wrap for anybody. Just to reiterate, you'll be getting a copy of this presentation, and if you have any questions at all. My name is Bob G. Antonio. I am the product manager for the Wand Anesthesia System, and I can be reached at Aseptico. My direct telephone number, and I'll say it slowly, is area code 425-408-9303. And one more time, that's 425-408-9303, or simply visit us at aseptico.com. Thanks, Danny.
You're welcome. Thank you, and thank everybody else for your time. Have a great day.
The organizer